All right, hi students. I wanted to share with you a few additional things that you can do when you're navigating in Premiere. One thing we've probably already talked about, but I'm going to draw your attention to again, is the ability to scale the timeline using these little drag handles here, and that allows us to zoom in and out and see either very small areas of our footage or very large areas of our footage. Now I want to show you a couple other things here in terms of some tools that you have at your disposal that will be useful, particularly when you have a really long timeline. We can do what's called setting an in and an out point. And that's going to come in really handy when you start working with effects and you start working with transitions and your computer starts having to do more work to play back all the things that you're throwing at it when you are making these high-powered edits to these clips. So I want to begin by showing you these two bracket things here. And what these will do when you click on them is they will set kind of a little boundary wherever you click. And you are basically, what you're doing here is you are isolating this section of your timeline as sort of the area that your computer is focusing on. So I'm actually going to make it a tiny bit wider. That's a little too wide. There we go. And then a little wider over here. Okay. So what that's doing is that is basically telling the computer, this is the area I'm working on right now, and this is what I'm going to be doing. So to show you how this is an extremely powerful tool, I'm going to make sure you guys make sure you're in the effects tab. And this is where you can go to add transitions to your video, add different effects that are pre-made. There's some pretty interesting stuff in here. But for now, we're going to focus on adding a transition. Now the thing about Premiere that's interesting is that it allows you to insert transitions independently in the video and audio. So you can put one transition up here in your video clip and you can choose a different transition to use transition between your sound. So I'm just going to go into audio and I'm going to grab a simple transition for audio, and you can see it drops this little gray box in here, and I can actually click and drag the edges of this to make that transition last longer if I want. And I can do the same thing for video transitions. So I'm going to open that up, and there's all sorts of options here. I'm going to pick one that isn't too demanding on my system. So this page peel thing does this little cool animation. I'm going to pick something a little simpler. I'm going to do a dip to white, which basically fades to white between the clips and then fades back up to the picture again. And we can see that when I click on this dip to white video clip, I get some options. I get to decide how long that clip is, etc. And when I click ahead of it, I can play back. To play it back. It did not play it smoothly. And you can see here this yellow that you see in the time line up here basically indicates that your computer is still trying to calculate things as it's playing back, so things may not be smooth. And you may even see red depending on the amount of demand that the thing you're trying to achieve is putting on your system. So if you have this, what you can do is you can go up and we have the option to render from in to out. And what that means is it's going to take a moment, it's going to perform all those calculations that needs to happen and save them in a file somewhere so that the computer can use them as a reference so that when you hit play, it plays back nice and smooth. Now, if you don't do this, if you don't set these little ins and outs, your computer will by default render your entire timeline, which is fine. But if you're working on one particular area, you may want to save time by making sure that you isolate the spot in your timeline that you're currently focused on doing. So let's go ahead and select render in to out, and we'll see this progress bar comes up. Now it's checking its way through and it needs in order to play this back smoothly. And there you have it. So that's something to keep in mind as you're working, to continuously watch the color up here, that if you have a lot of red and if you have a lot of yellow, you might struggle to see the full effect of what you're trying to do with your video, because your computer might be struggling to keep up with you. So this applies to other things such as a video effect, and there's a lot of those. We can do a, let's see, these are all animated effects. I'm going to grab something a little simpler like a, why am I making such a decision out of this? Sure, let's make one of these black and white. That works. Black and white is a relatively simple one, but you can see that once I drag that effect onto my clip, you can see that it turned yellow again. So if I want to totally play this back smoothly, I'm going to render it again. Now, with that being said, you don't necessarily want to render everything every time you make a change. For example, there isn't too much to do with this black and white effect that we dropped here, but say we drop a different one, like the sphere, and we're going to drop that right on top of this one. You can see now my timeline is turned red because the spherize command does some pretty wacky stuff. If I drag out the radius of the circle, it's going to physically distort my footage and make it look like there's a giant bubble in here. So that is very taxing on the computer hardware. So if I do an effect like that, there's no question that my computer is going to need to take a moment to get its act together and figure itself out, and I'm going to render that intent, and you can see that going across, and we're going to see the side of our zone that we set up, and there's that weird bubble effect. So that is that. Now, say we are done with this small area and we want to go back out, and we don't want to, because you can drag these around and adjust it. You can also move it. So say you want to grab a different spot on your timeline, you can grab it by the handles and move it to a later area in your timeline. But say we don't want this anymore. We can actually go up to, I believe it's under markers, and we can say clear in and out, and that's going to get rid of that completely. So let's zoom out, and there you have it. So that's just a brief overview of some of the stuff that you can do in terms of special effects with Premiere, and also some information about making sure that you're allowing your computer to keep up with you so you don't run into issues. That's all for now.